Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I think it's easy for everyone to kind of agree that parents have it kind of hard, and that I think almost all parents deserve kind of like a little weight lifted off of their shoulders. And I think one example of a way that parents try to lift this weight off their shoulders, I think, is through child leashes, which if you haven't seen them, it's kind of like a backpack for kids, and they're usually like shaped like a monkey. Monkey's got like a big long tail that's like connected to the parents' like belts or something. But I think though it makes it a little easier on the parents, I think that the child leashes are essentially not good for the child. And I think my major claim that I'm presenting today is that child leashes are harmful to children. And I'm going to explain this with 3 supporting claims that I think support the main claim. And the first claim that I'm presenting is that because of the leash, the children don't learn, the leash prevents children from learning to stay close to their parents. And the Women's and Children's Health Network says that children enjoy playing in and exploring their natural world, backyard, park, and beach. At the same time, they are learning about their built world around them, roads, houses, shops, and schools. And I think from this we learn that it's important for children to explore the world around them and to have a little freedom to move on their own. And I think I've seen in my life that children who are given more freedom in their lives, in their childhood, usually come up to be more independent in the future. And I think the child leash kind of, in preventing them to move on their own, it makes them less dependent. And so in the future, they become less independent. Also with the child leash, or I guess without the child leash, children learn also boundaries that are supposed to be set for them, because when they move too far from the parent tells them to come back. And so they learn over time how much is too far to move. And if they're always connected to the parent, then there's no way for them to learn like what's okay and what's not okay in the distance between them and the parent. And also for me, from my experience, the best way that I learned to stay close to my parent was getting lost. And so if you're always connected to your parent, you don't have to go through like the existential crisis of getting lost. And yeah, and so that's one reason why I think the leashes are harmful to children, and that's more of in a psychological manner. The second reason I would say is child leashes create less attentive parents, because both the parents and the children, I think, learn from the child's exploration. And as the child learns to be a more independent, but also aware of the parent also learns for them to accept the child's independence, but also be more aware of their kind of where they are and what they're doing at all times. Because if a parent has a leash that's connected to the child, they don't really have to worry about their child being lost, because they know that they're always right there. But I think that causes them to be less attentive and to pay less attention to their children. And I've seen for myself personally, whenever I see a parent with a child leash, they're usually not looking at the child because they know that they're right there. And which I think is harmful for the children, because with the parents, if they're not attentive, it allows the child to do more things that aren't, I guess, acceptable or safe for the child. And you know, you can still do unwanted things as a child if you're connected to a leash. Like if the parent's not looking, you can still pick up stuff on the ground and eat it, which is bad. So for the third supporting claim I have, I say that demeaning children is harmful for a child's health. And it says in the article, the impact of an unpleasant, demeaning social interaction. It says, one of the most basic and persistent beliefs about the causes of human maladjustment is that repeated unpleasant and unpleasant encounters with others, especially those that occur during the early years of life, can have a powerfully adverse effect on adjustment. And so I think having a child leash can be seen as one of these unpleasant and upsetting encounters, or more so, being seen by other children while having a leash can be detrimental to their psychological health, because we get child leashes from animal leashes. So when we put a child leash on a child, it kind of equates them as being similar to animals and less human. And so because it demeans their image like this, it's detrimental to their psychological abilities and self-esteem in the future. And so, in conclusion, though parenting is hard and they do deserve breaks, I don't think child leashes are the way to go for this manner. For the three reasons of they prevent children from learning to stay close to their parents. 2, they create less attentive parents. And 3, they demean children psychologically, which is harmful to them. And so, yeah, child leashes, I believe, are harmful to children.
All right, well, you introduced the subject in an interesting way. I thought that was fine, and your propositions clearly stated. You start to give a preview, but you actually just begin the speech with that first point, so there isn't really a preview of what the structure is going to be. You dive into the first point. It's nicely labeled when you get to it, so that helps. The evidence that you present, I think, is a little bit problematic because, your quote is about learning and exploring, and then there's a presupposition that the leash prevents kids from learning and exploring. I would assume if you're staking the kid out in your front yard with a leash that would in fact be the case. I'm not exactly sure that that's the context in which child leashes are being used, so I think that there's some big presuppositions built into your argument that you need more data on. You do a good job explaining what it is you think the inference of the evidence is, but I'm not sure that you're giving us much reason to believe that that is the correct inference on that information. And there's not any other data about this. I don't know how frequently child leashes are used. I don't know that any experts have examined the effect directly of child leashes. We don't have any data that suggests, any statistical data that suggests a change in attitudes that kids have about themselves as a result of being leashed or any of those sorts of things. So I think that you're struggling here. You've got an idea that you feel strongly about. You kind of see a reason for objecting to it, but it feels like the evidence on these points is really thin. You depend on a couple of hypothetical examples. You've got a personal example about getting lost, of course. You mentioned that, but that sounds to me like that would be pretty damn traumatizing too. And wouldn't that fit your criteria of having, that personal kind of demeaning experience early in life that would be, potentially harmful to a child's lifetime survivability, being left by their parents or lost by their parents at Disneyland or the grocery store or something like that. I guess, that seems to me like that would be just as traumatic as maybe, somebody saying, oh, look, you've got a nice looking puppy there, and it's an adult who's talking to the child, and maybe they would be traumatized by that. I don't know. That's another one of those hypotheticals that I think is really a little vague in your argument. I think you deliver the speech nicely. I would always suggest, that it's a little bit dangerous to rely on the phone for your notes because it's usually a little small, and you were fine. You did okay, primarily because you didn't have a lot of evidence that you had to read. Had you had more evidence to read, I think you would have found it a little bit of a problem to use the phone for that. If you're going to use an electronic way of holding on to your information, make it something a little bit bigger for your benefit so that you don't get stuck or lost. But I think you lucked out on that, you know, mostly because, like I said, you're giving your explanations rather than relying on a whole bunch of data in the argument.